The silence in the Rodriguez household was deafening. Grief was not just an emotion here. It was a living, breathing entity that consumed every corner of their small East Los Angeles home. Elena sat by the window, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns of loss that seemed to weave through their family's history. Technology had always been her sanctuary. While others found comfort in family albums or memories, Elena found solace in lines of code, in the precise logic of algorithms that made sense when human emotions failed. Her brother Marco had been different. He was the bridge, the communicator, the one who could translate cold data into human stories. Their grandmother, Isabella Rodriguez, had been the first to recognize the unique paths of her grandchildren. A woman who had crossed the border with nothing but a sewing machine and extraordinary dreams. She would sit on their warm living room couch and tell stories of survival, of resilience. "Information is power," she would say, her weathered hands moving as if conducting an invisible orchestra. But understanding? That's the true weapon. Marco had inherited her storytelling gift. Elena had inherited her analytical mind. The day of the explosion replayed in Elena's mind like a fractured film reel. Marco's last message, cryptic, urgent, kept echoing. "Something's brewing," he had said during their final video call. "There are connections nobody's seeing." Diplomatic. Communications were always complex, but Marco had been different. He wasn't just pushing papers. He was a strategic thinker who saw patterns where others saw chaos. His reports had been gaining attention in high-level circles, drawing both admiration and potential enemies. Elena began reconstructing his last months meticulously. She accessed every database she could legally and sometimes illegally penetrate. Digital forensics became her new obsession. Each fragment of data was a puzzle piece, and she was determined to complete the picture that had cost her brother his life. The official report was frustratingly generic. Unexpected terrorist incident. No clear perpetrators identified. But Elena knew better. Unexpected meant unexplained. And unexplained was unacceptable. Her parents struggled differently with the loss. Maria Rodriguez, a high school history teacher, channeled her grief into supporting other families who had lost children to unexplained violence. Roberto, who ran a small computer repair shop, became quieter, his normally vibrant spirit dimmed by the inexplicable loss of his son. But Elena was transforming. Every night, she would sit in her small home office, surrounded by multiple monitors, tracing digital breadcrumbs. Her MIT training merged with a personal vendetta. She wasn't just mourning anymore, she was preparing for war. The concept of Cerberus began to take shape during those long, intense research nights. Named after the mythological three-headed dog guarding the underworld, it would be more than just a predictive system. It would be a guardian, a sentinel that could see the invisible threats lurking in the complex web of global communications. Marco had always believed that true intelligence was about understanding context, not just collecting data. Elena would prove him right. Her tattoo, the three-headed Cerberus, was more than just a memorial. It would become her interface, her weapon, her promise to a brother whose potential had been violently cut short. The world of intelligence had rules, boundaries, limitations. Elena was about to rewrite them all. In the quiet of her research space, surrounded by the ghosts of data and memory, a new kind of intelligence was being born. Not just a computer system, but a living, breathing entity that could see beyond human perception. Marco might be gone, but his legacy was just beginning. The Rodriguez family had always been about transformation, from immigrants crossing borders to dreamers reshaping possibilities. Now, Elena would continue that legacy, not through diplomatic channels or small business entrepreneurship, but through a technological revolution that would change how the world understood threat and protection. Grief, she was learning, was not an ending. It was a beginning. MIT was more than an institution. It was a proving ground, a coliseum where intellectual titans battled with algorithms and theories. And Elena Rodriguez was about to challenge every conventional wisdom that existed. Her application had raised eyebrows. A young Latina from East Los Angeles, with a background in computational psychology and geopolitical data analysis. She didn't fit the traditional mold. But her entrance essay had been a manifesto, a bold declaration of intent to revolutionize intelligence gathering. Dr. Alan Rothman, the department's most respected and most cynical researcher, had been the first to truly see her potential. During her initial interview, he had pushed her hard, his steel-gray eyes measuring every response. "You're proposing something that sounds like science fiction," he had challenged, sliding her application across the desk. "A predictive intelligence system that doesn't just analyze data, but understands human motivation?" Elena had met his gaze. Without blinking. "History is full of technologies that once sounded impossible, Professor. Radio, computers, space travel. Impossibility is just a failure of imagination." Her doctoral research began to take shape as a radical reimagining of the threat detection. Where traditional systems looked backward, analyzing historical data to predict future patterns, Elena was developing something revolutionary. Her models incorporated psychological profiling, economic indicators, communication network analysis, and geopolitical tension metrics into a complex predictive matrix. The computational challenges were immense. Each algorithm was like a living organism, designed to learn, adapt, and evolve. She wasn't just writing code. She was creating an intelligence that could think beyond human limitations. Her research lab became a sanctuary of controlled chaos. Multiple screens displayed complex data streams. Quantum computing rigs hummed with potential, and walls were covered with intricate mind maps connecting seemingly unrelated global events. Fellow researchers were skeptical. Some were openly dismissive. "You can't predict human behavior with an algorithm," they would argue during departmental seminars. "Human beings are too complex, too unpredictable." But Elena had seen complexity her entire life. Growing up in an immigrant household, navigating cultural boundaries, watching her parents transform challenges into opportunities, that was complexity. And if humans could adapt, why couldn't an intelligence system do the same? Her breakthrough came during a late-night coding session that blurred the lines between research and obsession. She had been working on quantum encryption techniques that could create an adaptive neural network, something that could process information at speeds and depths no human could comprehend. The first successful prototype emerged almost accidentally. A series of financial transactions that appeared random to traditional analysis suddenly revealed a complex international funding network for potential terrorist activities. When she presented her initial findings, the academic review board was stunned into a profound silence. Dr. Rothman, typically a harsh critic, leaned forward with unexpected intensity. "How did you see these connections?" he asked, his voice a mixture of challenge and genuine curiosity. Elena explained her approach, not just as a technical achievement, but as a philosophical breakthrough. "Traditional intelligence looks at data points," she said. "My system looks at the spaces between the points, the relationships, the unspoken narratives." Her computational model wasn't just analyzing data. It was interpreting human behavior, understanding motivations, predicting actions before they became visible. It was less a computer system and more a form of technological intuition. The tattoo of Cerberus on her forearm was more than symbolic. Each of its three heads represented a different analytical approach: predictive modeling, psychological profiling, and real-time data integration. What appeared to be a simple piece of body art was actually a quantum-encrypted interface, a physical manifestation of her life's most ambitious work. As her doctoral research progressed, Elena realized she was doing more than developing a technological tool. She was creating a new language of intelligence, a way of understanding global human behavior that transcended traditional boundaries of analysis that the academic world watched, a mixture of skepticism and growing respect. Some called her work revolutionary. Others dismissed it as an elaborate academic fantasy. But nobody could ignore her anymore. Marco's words echoed in her mind. Information is just data. Understanding, that's where true power lies. She was about to prove him right. The laboratory was a cathedral of controlled chaos. Quantum computing rigs hummed with an almost sentient energy, their complex arrays of processors, creating a symphony of technological potential. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. It was 3:47 a.m. The rest of MIT's advanced research complex was silent, but her world was alive with possibility. The breakthrough had not been a moment of sudden inspiration, but a relentless campaign against the boundaries of computational science. For 3 years, she had been pushing the limits of quantum encryption, neural network design, and predictive modeling. Where other researchers saw walls, Elena saw doorways waiting to be opened. Her computational model was unlike anything the scientific community had ever conceived. Traditional AI systems were reactive, they analyzed data after the fact. Cerberus was different. It was predictive, adaptive, almost prescient in its ability to understand complex human behaviors and global systems. The quantum encryption technique she had developed was revolutionary. Most researchers believed creating a truly adaptive, self-learning intelligence network was impossible. Elena saw impossibility as nothing more than a temporary challenge. Her personal history fueled every line of code. Marco's death had taught her that traditional intelligence gathering was fundamentally broken. Information wasn't just about collecting data. It was about understanding the invisible connections. That drove human behavior. The first true test came unexpectedly. The system was running a complex simulation of global financial transactions when something extraordinary happened. What appeared to be random financial movements suddenly revealed a complex underground network of potential terrorist funding. The connections were so intricate, so deeply hidden that no human analyst could have discovered them. Dr. Rothman, her primary advisor, had been skeptical when she first proposed the concept. You're talking about creating an intelligence that doesn't just analyze data, but predicts human behavior on a global scale, he would say, his voice a mixture of scientific caution and growing excitement. Elena's approach was holistic. She wasn't just creating an algorithm, she was designing a living, breathing intelligence that could learn, adapt, and evolve. Each computational layer was like a neural network, capable of understanding context, motivation, and potential future. Actions. The tattoo on her arm, the three-headed Cerberus, was more than just a symbolic representation. It was a quantum encrypted interface, a physical manifestation of her most groundbreaking work. Each head represented a different analytical approach, predictive modeling, psychological profiling, and real-time data integration. Nights blurred into days. Coffee became her primary sustenance. Her small apartment was a controlled disaster of research materials, complex diagrams, and prototype quantum computing modules. Family photos of Marco watched her from a corner, constant reminder of why she was pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The scientific community was divided. Some called her work revolutionary. Others dismissed it as an elaborate academic fantasy. But nobody could ignore the preliminary results. Her first major demonstration came during an international cybersecurity conference. While other researchers presented traditional threat detection methods, Elena unveiled a live demonstration of Cerberus's capabilities. The room fell silent. Using only publicly available data streams, Her system began to map out a complex international network of potential cyber threats. Financial transactions, communication patterns, geopolitical tensions, all woven together into a predictive model that seemed to anticipate actions before they could be planned. Dr. Rothman watched from the back of the auditorium, a rare smile crossing his typically stern face. This was more than a doctoral thesis. This was a fundamental reimagining of intelligence gathering. A quantum breakthrough wasn't just about technology. It was about understanding the fundamental nature of human behavior, of global systems, of the invisible threads that connect seemingly unrelated events. Elena had created more than a computer system. She had given birth to a new form of intelligence. As the conference attendees stared in stunned silence, she knew her life would never be the same. Cerberus was no longer just a research project. It was a weapon, a shield, a way of seeing the world that no one had ever imagined possible. Marcos. Words echoed in her mind. Information is just data. Understanding, that's where true power lies. She was about to change everything. The first official contact came on a rain-soaked Tuesday in February. Elena was least expecting it, a nondescript envelope delivered by a courier who seemed more machine than human, with eyes that gave away nothing. Inside, a single encrypted communication, no letterhead, no official markings. Just a series of coordinates and an encrypted quantum key that would take her most advanced systems hours to crack. The Central Intelligence Agency didn't make formal introductions. They made strategic approaches. Her contact was Michael Calloway, a veteran intelligence strategist who looked like he had been carved from granite and disappointment. His first meeting with Elena was less an interview and more an interrogation, conducted in a windowless room deep within a nondescript government building in Arlington. "Your system detected something we've been tracking for months," Calloway said, sliding a classified folder across the table. "But you found it in weeks." The folder contained a complex network of financial transactions that traced an underground funding mechanism for potential terrorist activities. What traditional intelligence had missed for years, Cerberus had mapped out with surgical precision. Elena understood immediately. This wasn't just about technological validation. This was about saving lives. The financial network was intricate as spider's web of transactions spanning continents. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands, cryptocurrency movements through anonymous wallets, communication patterns that seemed random but were anything but. Cerberus had not just identified the network. It had predicted its next potential moves. "How did you see these connections?" Calloway asked, his voice a mixture of professional skepticism and genuine curiosity. She explained her approach, not as a technical achievement, but as a philosophical breakthrough. "Traditional intelligence looks at data points," Elena said. "My system looks at the relationships between those points. The unspoken narratives, the potential energy of human motivation." Her first major success came with preventing a coordinated cyber attack on 3 major financial institutions. Cerberus had identified the threat 6 months before any traditional intelligence system would have detected a whisper of the plan. The attack was sophisticated. Multiple entry points, complex encryption, a distributed network of compromised systems that would have overwhelmed conventional cybersecurity measures. But Cerberus saw beyond the technical infrastructure. It understood the human motivations, the psychological profiles of the potential attackers. 3 days before the planned attack, Elena's system generated a comprehensive report: location predictions, potential team compositions, psychological profiles of key operatives, communication patterns, financial movement predictions. When the report landed on Calloway's desk, it was more than just a technical document. It was a roadmap to prevention. The CIS cyber response team moved with unprecedented precision. Not a single line of code was needed to be written. No traditional defensive measures were required. By understanding the human element, they dismantled the threat before it could even materialize. But success always comes with a price. Elena began to understand that Cerberus was more than just a technological tool. It was a weapon, a shield, a way of seeing the world that challenged every existing intelligence paradigm. Her small research lab became a secure facility. Non-disclosure agreements transformed her academic work into a classified project. The line between scientific research and national security blurred completely. Calloway became more than a contact. He was a bridge between her academic world and the complex landscape of global intelligence. "You're not just tracking threats," he told her during one of their encrypted communications. "You're predicting human behavior at a level we've never seen before." The tattoo of Cerberus on her arm seemed to pulse with a new energy. Each of its 3 heads representing predictive modeling, psychological profiling, and real-time data integration was no longer just a symbolic representation. It was becoming a living interface between human intelligence and technological prediction. Marco's words echoed in her mind. Information is just data. Understanding, that's where true power lies. She was rewriting the rules of global security. One algorithm at a time, the world was about to change. And few people would ever know how or why. The first attempt on her life was subtle. So subtle that most would have dismissed it as a random incident. A meticulously engineered car accident on a rain-slicked Virginia highway. A communication network breach that seemed too perfect to be coincidental. A series of digital breadcrumbs that suggested someone was not just watching, but actively hunting. Elena Rodriguez had become more than a scientist. She was now a primary target in a global game where information was the most dangerous weapon. Her secure research facility transformed overnight. What had been an open, collaborative space became a fortress of technological innovation and personal protection. Michael Calloway from the CIA became more than a contact. He was now her primary shield against forces that wanted Cerberus silenced. "They're not just trying to stop your research," Calloway warned during a heavily encrypted video conference. "They want to eliminate the possibility of what your system represents." They was a complex network. International crime syndicates, whose operations relied on opacity and unpredictability. Rogue state intelligence agencies threatened by a technology that could see through their most carefully constructed deceptions. Private military contractors, whose lucrative contracts depended on perpetual uncertainty. Cerberus had become more than a predictive intelligence system. It was a threat to entire ecosystems of global manipulation. Her family became her first priority. Her parents were relocated to a secure location, their identities carefully scrubbed from public databases. Maria and Roberto Rodriguez became John and Jane Miller in a quiet suburban community, protected by layers of digital and physical security that most governments would envy. The tattoo on her arm was no longer just a symbolic interface. It had become a quantum encrypted communication and protection system. Each of the 3 heads of the Cerberus now represented different layers of security: predictive threat detection, personal protection protocols, and real-time response mechanisms. Elena understood the game had changed. She wasn't just developing a technological tool anymore. She was engaged in a high-stakes battle where the future of global security hung in the balance. Her MIT research lab became a ghost. Official records showed it had been disbanded, research materials archived. In reality, it had transformed into the most advanced private intelligence hub in the world. Quantum computing rigs that could process more data in seconds than most intelligence agencies could in months. Communication systems that could detect and neutralize threats before they could even be conceived. The attacks became more sophisticated. A financial manipulation attempt that would have crashed her primary research funding. A complex digital attack designed to corrupt her most critical data sets. Psychological warfare tactics that attempted to discredit her work through carefully constructed disinformation campaigns. But Cerberus was always one step ahead. Each attack was not just defended against, it was analyzed, understood, and used to strengthen the system's predictive capabilities. What her attackers saw as offensive maneuvers, Elena transformed into opportunities for learning and improvement. Calloway was both her protector and her strategic advisor. "You're creating something that will fundamentally change how we understand global security," he told her during one of their strategy sessions. "And there are powerful people who will do anything to prevent that from happening." The personal cost was immense. Normal life became a concept of the past. Dating was impossible. Social media was a carefully constructed illusion. Her entire existence was now dedicated to protecting and evolving Cerberus. But she was not alone. A small, carefully vetted team of the most brilliant minds in computational psychology, quantum computing, and global security worked alongside her. Each member understood the stakes. Each member knew that what they were building was more than a technological breakthrough. It was a new way of understanding human behavior and global systems. Her brother Marco's photograph watched over her primary research station, a constant reminder of why she had started this journey. Not for personal glory, not for technological achievement, but to prevent the kind of loss that had torn her family apart. As another potential threat was neutralized by Cerberus, Elena allowed herself a momentary smile. The system was learning, evolving, becoming something far beyond her original conception. The world was about to change, and she was going to be the one to change it. The three-headed guardian was watching, always watching. The Pentagon briefing room was a cathedral of military and intelligence power. Rows of high-ranking officials, each adorned with medals that told stories of past conflicts, sat in a carefully orchestrated arrangement of hierarchical precision. Colonel Jack Harriman dominated the room, a living embodiment of traditional military intelligence, his career built on decades of conventional thinking. Elena Rodriguez stood at the back of the room, seemingly insignificant, a civilian, a scientist, a woman who didn't fit the traditional mold of an intelligence operative. The preliminary reports had been dismissed. Her initial presentations had been met with barely concealed smirks and condescending glances. Another academic fantasy, the whispers suggested. Another theoretical model that means nothing in the real world. But Elena had come prepared. The briefing was supposed to be about emerging global threats. Traditional intelligence agencies presented their standard reports, complex maps, historical data, predictive models that were more about maintaining the status quo than actually preventing future incidents. Colonel Harriman's voice cut through the room like a blade. "We've been tracking these potential threat vectors for months," he declared, his fingers pointing to a complex series of global communication patterns. "Our current models suggest." Elena knew the moment to act had arrived. Her quantum-encrypted interface, the Cerberus tattoo on her left arm, began to pulse almost imperceptibly. To the untrained eye, it was nothing more than an intricate piece of body art. But to those who understood, it was the most advanced intelligence-gathering tool ever conceived. Slowly, deliberately, she began to roll up her sleeve. The room fell. Silent. What appeared to be a simple tattoo was actually a living, breathing intelligence interface. As her fingers traced the outline of one of the Cerberus heads, holographic displays erupted from nowhere. Detailed threat maps materialized in the center of the briefing room. Not just static images, but dynamic, evolving representations of global security landscapes. Cryptographic signatures danced alongside financial transaction trails. Communication metadata wove intricate patterns that revealed coordinated global threats that no traditional intelligence system had ever detected. The chuckles died immediately. Colonel Harriman stepped forward, his previous skepticism replaced by a look of profound respect. "How is this possible?" he whispered, his career of military intelligence suddenly feeling obsolete. Cerberus wasn't just showing data. It was revealing the invisible connections that drove global conflicts. Psychological profiles of potential threat actors. Predictive models that didn't just show where threats might emerge, but why they would emerge. Each of the three heads of the Cerberus tattoo represented a different analytical approach. Predictive. Modeling that could anticipate global events. Psychological profiling that understood human motivations. Real-time data integration that saw connections invisible to human analysts. The military and intelligence officials watched in stunned silence as the holographic display revealed layers of global threats that challenged everything they understood about intelligence gathering. Financial networks that appeared random suddenly revealed coordinated funding mechanisms for potential terrorist activities. Communication patterns that seemed innocuous exposed complex international conspiracies. Geopolitical tensions were mapped with a precision that bordered on prescience. Michael Calloway, who had been instrumental in bringing Elena to this moment, watched from the side of the room. His calculated risk was paying off. Cerberus was about to change everything. Elena's presentation was more than a technical demonstration. It was a philosophical challenge to how intelligence had been understood for decades. Traditional methods relied on historical data and human interpretation. Cerberus operated on an entirely different level, predicting human behavior by understanding the complex ecosystem of global interactions. The room was no longer just listening. They were witnessing a fundamental transformation of global security. Colonel Harriman's earlier dismissiveness had completely evaporated. "How long have you been tracking these networks?" he asked, his voice a mixture of professional curiosity and barely concealed awe. Elena's response was simple and devastating. "We're not just tracking them," she said. "We're predicting their next moves before they even understand what those moves might be." The Pentagon briefing room had become a pivotal moment in modern intelligence history. The old guard was about to be replaced by a new paradigm of understanding. Global security. And it all started with a tattoo. The three-headed guardian was no longer just a myth. It was watching. Always watching. The world didn't change with a bang. It changed with a whisper of data, a quantum pulse of information that would redefine the very concept of global intelligence. Elena Rodriguez stood in her most secure research facility, a space that was part laboratory, part command center, part sanctuary. The holographic displays around her were alive, pulsing with real-time global information that no human mind could comprehend. Cerberus was more than a system now. It was a living, breathing entity of intelligence. The prevention of the first major global threat came almost silently. No dramatic explosions. No military interventions. Just a series of calculated digital interventions that dismantled a complex international network planning simultaneous attacks across 3 continents. Michael Calloway watched the unfolding scenario with a mixture of professional admiration and barely concealed fear. "You've created something beyond our wildest imagination," he said, his voice hushed. The attack would have targeted critical infrastructure, financial systems, communication networks, energy grids. Traditional intelligence would have discovered the threat too late. Cerberus neutralized it before the first line of code could be executed. Each head of the Cerberus system represented a different layer of intelligence. The first head analyzed global communication patterns. The second predicted psychological motivations. The third integrated real-time data from multiple sources. What made the system truly revolutionary was its ability to understand human behavior at a level no previous intelligence system could comprehend. It wasn't just collecting data, it was interpreting the human condition. The quantum encryption that powered Cerberus went beyond traditional computational limits. Most believed quantum computing was about processing speed. Alana had transformed it into a form of predictive consciousness. Her team, a carefully selected group of the world's most brilliant minds, worked in near religious silence. Computational psychologists, quantum physicists, cybersecurity experts, all united by a single vision. They were no longer just researchers. They were guardians of a new form of global protection. The international response was complex. Some governments saw Cerberus as a threat. Others viewed it as the ultimate defensive tool. Intelligence agencies that had previously operated in shadowy independence now found themselves obsolete. Elena understood the moral complexity of her creation. Cerberus could prevent conflicts, but it could also be used for unprecedented surveillance. The line between protection and control was razor thin. Her brother Marco's photograph watched over the primary research station. A constant reminder that this wasn't about technology. It was about preventing human loss. The first major test came unexpectedly. A potential nuclear escalation between two geopolitical rivals. Traditional intelligence would have seen the buildup of military assets, the heated diplomatic exchanges. Cerberus saw something deeper: the psychological motivations, a complex web of economic and political pressures that were driving the potential conflict. 3 days before the potential outbreak, Cerberus generated a comprehensive report. Not just military movements, but the deep psychological profiles of key decision-makers, the economic pressures, the personal histories that were driving their choices. The report was so detailed, so precise, that it allowed diplomatic channels to intervene with unprecedented accuracy. A potential global catastrophe was averted without a single shot being fired. But success came with a price. Elena became more than a scientist. She was now a global strategic asset, constantly under protection, her movements tracked, her communications monitored. The very system she created to prevent loss had transformed her own life into a carefully managed existence. Her quantum-encrypted Cerberus tattoo was no longer just an interface. It was a living part of her, a symbiotic technology that connected her to a global network of information and protection. The world was changing, and Elena Rodriguez was at the epicenter of that change. Global security would never be the same. The invisible threads that connected human behavior, that drove conflicts and collaborations, were now visible. Not just visible, predictable. As another potential global threat was neutralized by Cerberus, Elena allowed herself a momentary reflection. This wasn't just about technology. This was about understanding the complex, beautiful, terrifying nature of human existence. The three-headed guardian continued to watch, always watching, always protecting. Time became a different concept for Elena Rodriguez. Years were no longer measured in calendar days, but in global events prevented, in human lives saved, in threats neutralized before they could take shape. Cerberus had transformed from a theoretical concept to the most powerful intelligence system in human history. But power, she had learned, was never simple, never clean. Her secure research facility had become something between a technological monastery and a global security nerve center. Quantum computing rigs hummed with an almost sentient energy. Holographic displays mapped global interactions with a complexity that would have been unimaginable a decade earlier. The world had changed, and she was at the epicenter of that change. International security paradigms had been completely rewritten. Traditional intelligence agencies found themselves obsolete, forced to either adapt or become historical footnotes. Governments that had operated in shadows now existed in a world of unprecedented transparency. But transparency was not the same as vulnerability. Cerberus was a shield, not a weapon. This was Alana's fundamental philosophy. principles she had fought to maintain through countless ethical debates and strategic challenges. The system was designed to prevent conflict, not to create it. Her team had grown a carefully selected group of the most brilliant minds from around the globe. Computational psychologists worked alongside quantum physicists. Cybersecurity experts collaborated with global conflict researchers. They were more than a research team. They were guardians of a new form of global understanding. The personal cost had been significant. Normal life was a concept of the past. Dating was impossible. Social media was a carefully constructed illusion. Her entire existence was dedicated to protecting and evolving Cerberus. Her family remained in protective custody, their identities carefully managed to prevent potential retribution. But she was not alone. Michael Calloway, who had been her initial contact in the intelligence community, had become more than a colleague. He was a strategic partner, someone who understood the profound implications of what they had created. "We're not just tracking threats," he would say during their encrypted strategy sessions. "We're understanding the fundamental nature of human conflict." The tattoo on her arm, the three-headed Cerberus, was no longer just an interface. It had become a living part of her, a symbiotic technology that connected her to a global network of information and protection. Each head of the system represented a different analytical approach: global communication pattern analysis, psychological, motivation prediction, real-time multi-source data integration. The breakthrough that truly changed everything came unexpectedly. Cerberus didn't just predict potential conflicts. It began to understand the root causes of human tension: economic disparities, cultural misunderstandings, psychological traumas that drove entire geopolitical narratives. A potential conflict between two nations was averted not through military intervention, but through a comprehensive report that highlighted the deep psychological and economic factors driving the tension. Diplomatic channels used Cerberus's insights to create targeted interventions that addressed the fundamental issues. Her brother Marco's photograph still watched over a primary research station, a constant reminder of why she had started this journey. Not for personal glory, not for technological achievement, but to prevent the kind of loss that had torn her family apart. The ethical debates were constant. Could such a system be misused? Absolutely. The potential for surveillance was unprecedented. But Elena had built multiple fail-safes, ethical constraints that were as fundamental to Cerberus as its computational core. Global leaders began to understand that Cerberus was not just a technological tool. It was a new way of understanding human behavior, of preventing conflicts before they could emerge. Universities began developing entirely new fields of study: computational psychology, predictive global conflict resolution. The academic world was being transformed by the implications of her work. As another potential global threat was neutralized, Elena allowed herself a moment of reflection. The system was more than she had ever imagined. It was learning, evolving, becoming something far beyond her original conception. The world was different now, more connected, more understood, not perfect, but closer to prevention than ever before. The three-headed guardian continued to watch, always watching, always protecting. And somewhere, she knew, Marco was smiling.